choppy little guy does not know the way to get here. It's Hatch Trail.
Funny story about this one. When I first started the channel, this was one of the games I knew I really wanted to do a video on. I put it off for a while though, checking out some other Star Wars games I was interested in first. Well, today it's finally time to check out one of the more iconic Episode 1 tie-ins, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Released in May 1999, just 2 days after The Phantom Menace hit theaters, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer is a racing game, obviously, based off of the pod racing sport we see introduced in the movie it was tying into. The game was developed for the Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, Microsoft Windows, Macintosh, and the Game Boy Color? I mean, that's basically a different game. There was a PS1 port announced to be in development, but it never saw release, and I couldn't find any information as to why. My guess is the console was nearing the end of its life cycle. Racer was headed up by Star Wars legend John Knowles, and several other prominent developers from LucasArts who had just wrapped up development on Shadows of the Empire when they began working alongside the movie's production crew to try and create a game based on the movie's pod racing concept. Originally, the game was even supposed to be called Star Wars Pod Racer, but apparently some other company owned the trademark for any game with the word pod in the title, so in the end, they settled on just calling it Episode 1 Racer. It's a little strange. I feel like I remember it being called Star Wars Pod Racer, like I've been hit with the Mandela effect or something, because I had this game as a kid on the PC. I can literally remember having this exact case, but for some reason, my brain always thought it said Pod Racer. Either way, I loved this game as a kid. Playing through the new levels and seeing all these new planets was exciting, not to mention all of the bizarre and interesting pod racers we can unlock. For this video, we're looking at the N64 version of the game, which is pretty much the same as the other versions, except just like Shadows of the Empire, all of the pre-rendered cutscenes have been removed. The cartridge just couldn't handle them. Racer has a very typical racing game structure featuring 4 different tournaments to play through, each more difficult than the last, with increasingly challenging environments to navigate and try to race through. Let me just say, the learning curve between the first and second tournament is pretty substantial, and they get harder every new circuit. Really, the only way to keep up with the difficulty spikes is to constantly be upgrading your pod racer or just keep swapping to new vehicles and racers altogether, of which there is a surprisingly eclectic selection. And by that, I mean there's 25 total racers to pick from, 23 unlockable without cheats. That is kind of a lot of pod racers. Among them are some recognizable characters like Anakin or Sebulba, and a bunch of other characters we did see briefly in the first movie, all of which you can play as, and most of which have the same voice actors from the movie, including Anakin, properly voiced by Jake Lloyd. As mentioned earlier, there's a way to upgrade your different pod racers thanks to Watto's shop, where you can buy parts new, or head out back to the junkyard to see if he's got any parts for cheaper. And true to the film, Republic credits are no good here, only money, which in Tatooine terms means their on-planet currency, Trugits. Speaking of Tatooine, the first level of the game takes place there on the Boonta Eve course. Also, there is no narrative or storyline to speak of this time around, because the real star of the show is the different planets and racetracks you'll get to visit and play on. We get to visit 8 different planets across the 4 main circuits, but each time you visit a planet, the track has changed, oftentimes being expanded to be even longer and with more various different paths to take. Seriously, some of the coolest planets aren't even available until you get to the 2nd and 3rd circuits, which in order to progress you'll have to place at least 3rd on every level to see the next course, which, depending on the track, can actually end up being pretty difficult.
Anakin! How many times I told you? Stay away from hard couplings! That was good.
You may even recognize some of these planets if you've been with my channel for a while, as we'll race on both Malastare.
They're pod racing on Malastare. Very fast, very dangerous.
And Uvo 4, both of which have appeared in Star Wars Bounty Hunter, and both of which we covered in my retrospective of that game. Those aside, there are some really cool maps available here. I mean, we'll see some underwater areas, some lava pit industrial areas, destroyed cities. I mean, I was quite frankly shocked at how cool some of these environments are. One of these locations went on to appear in Episode 2, showing a pod race on a hologram of the cantina Anakin and Obi-Wan chase Zam Wesell into. See that there? That's Ando Prime, and we can race various versions of that track here on Episode 1 Racer. Man, I love the connectivity of old Star Wars. Another planet we get to see is the oceanic world of Aquilaris, which fans might recognize sort of being mentioned in the novel Star Wars Knight Errant. Though the planet mentioned there was Aquilaris Minor, not the main world we see in this game. Still similar, I'm pretty sure they're the same system. My favorite track, however, is found on the planet of Ord Ibana, built around an old derelict mining colony that a scrapper named Deathrow Glock retrofitted into 3 different pod racing tracks to play on. Avid readers of the Star Wars Jedi comics from 2003 may remember spotting this one in issue number 4 titled Count Dooku. That's enough lore ranting about planets, let's talk about the gameplay a little bit. The primary game mode is called Tournament, and it's what I described before, where you'll play through a series of 4 increasingly difficult circuits. It's a championship, and it's the mode you'll be spending the most time with. That being said, there are 2 other modes to talk about. That's the free race mode, and is exactly what it sounds like. You can play any level previously unlocked with any racer previously unlocked, which seems kinda useless to be honest, because you can just do that in the tournament mode as well. The only difference is that in free race mode you can set the difficulty of the enemy AI, but typically it's the tracks themselves that are hard, not really the opponents. Then lastly, you've got the time attack mode, which again is exactly what it sounds like, racing against the clock to get the best time you can. The unique thing about this mode is that it removes your opponents from the map and allows you to focus on just getting the best possible time you can on the track. Time attack is also totally absent from the PC version of the game, but that one does allow you to just remove opponents from free race mode for a somewhat similar experience. Getting into the game itself, Racer really is your standard fare racing game. Speed ahead, make 3 laps around a course, and beat your competition to the finish line. That being said, there are a few things that make it stand out. One of those being the repair mechanics. See, your pod racer can actually take some serious damage on these very dangerous tracks. So much so that seeing it outright explode is going to be a pretty common visual. With this in mind, you can actually make repairs mid-race to try and account for the damage you might be taking like we see in the film. Doing this slows your vehicle down, but if you time things right, that slight temporary slowdown can be preferable to the 3-second setback of watching your pod racer explode. You can speed your repairs up by buying pit droids from Watto, which also cost you Trugits, but are probably going to be worth the investment in the long run. Another more conventional racing game mechanic is your boost, working similar to how you might expect a nitrous boost to work in a game like Need for Speed. This becomes crucial to actually winning races in later circuits. You can use it repeatedly, but it does require both a brief 1-second charge up and a roughly 3-second cooldown. But because it can slowly overheat your engines, you have to know how long to use it, which actually means you can use it strategically for smaller boosts to close the gap between you and your competitors, or just blow nearly all of it on one big advantage gain on a straight stretch. Other than that, it's going to be a really straightforward gameplay experience. There isn't much to say on the music either, since it's pretty much all just Williams tracks ripped straight from the first movie's score, which helps it fit nice and snug as an Episode 1 tie-in. One thing I will say is music only plays when you start your 3rd and final lap. I thought this was a strange decision at first because the first 2 laps feel kinda quiet when you first start playing, but after a few levels I really got it. When the challenge starts to increase, that final lap can feel very intense, so the music kicking in right as you recognize it's make or break time helps everything to feel all more climactic. And honestly, the team did such a good job with all the sound effects for the pod racers that having those first 2 laps to really tune into the different sounds of your racer speeding through the environment or the chugging sounds of it being repaired helped make it feel more like that first part of the movie's race sequence when there's not music, just the sounds of the race. Honestly, LucasArts really nailed the feeling of flying through a course at 500 miles an hour. Star Wars Racer was met with some above-average reviews upon its release, garnering 7s, 8s, and 9s from major video game journalists at the time, and went on to become a serious cult classic both among Star Wars fans, racing game fans, and N64 fans in general. It is such a classic that it has since seen multiple re-releases and ports to modern hardware, including the PS4, Xbox One, and even the Nintendo Switch. Point is, people loved it then and still seem to love it now. Okay, so do I think Star Wars Episode 1 Racer is worth going back and trying for yourself? I'm pretty sure you've been able to garner a good idea of my answer, and that is yes. Episode 1 Racer is absolutely worth going back to experience for yourself. Not only is it a great Star Wars game, I personally think it's an awesome racing game in its own right. Like, even if this wasn't Star Wars, all of these really creative and exciting levels, mixed with solid gameplay and ample customization, adds up to an excellent racing game, just in general. The Star Wars skin just makes it feel all the more recognizable and fun. So if you're looking for an over-the-top sci-fi racing game on the N64, you really can't go wrong with this one. Thanks for tuning into this one with me, guys. This was such a blast through memory lane for me, and it was cool to be able to go in and re-experience such a stellar title like this. Tell me all about your experiences with Racer. Did you ever play this one? Drop a comment to let me know. Also, liking the video helps me out with the algorithm, and of course, subscribing will keep you up to date on the next older game I decide to cover here on the Retro Room. Thanks again for checking this one out with me, and I hope to see you on the next video. But until then, that's all I've got for you.